Hello, Year 11s. In today's video, we are going to be talking about this term here, apoptosis. Okay, so we're going to talk about what it is and why it's important. So the dot point that we're looking at from the study design is that apoptosis as a regulated process of programmed cell death. So to break that down for our success criteria, what I'd like you to be able to do at the end of this video is describe the process of apoptosis. So that's the mechanism of action, how it occurs, and the importance of apoptosis. So why is this useful in a healthy, functioning body? Okay, so what is apoptosis? And now we can define apoptosis, and if you are ever asked to write the definition of apoptosis, it's right here. It is programmed cell death. Okay, so it's part of the normal development of a cell. It's part of a cell's healthy functioning, and it's how we maintain a constant number of cells in our body. So apoptosis is happening. It's happening to you right now as you watch this video. And it's part of that normal development of a cell's life. So you can think of it sort of like as your cell gets a little bit older, the cell's functioning decreases. It's perhaps not as efficient as it used to be. It's reaching the end of its life. So we need that cell to die off so that we can replace it with a new cell that is able to complete that same function. Now, this is how the body maintains a constant number of cells. So if you have a little look at this picture to the right, you can see that we've got a scales and we've got a balance. So the number of old cells that are dying off is the same as the number of new cells that are being created through the cell cycle. And in a healthy adult, this is what we would expect to be happening. So it's a really key point here that apoptosis helps us keep that rate of cell death equal to the rate of cell renewal. Now, looking at why apoptosis is important, and I mentioned this earlier, but as cells become quite old, they need to be replaced. They're not functioning as well. So that's one of the points, that we replace cells at the end of their life. But also, if we get a cell that's been infected with a virus, or it's damaged in some way, it's got some other type of a disease, and we need to remove that cell from the body before it causes harm or before that infection spreads, well, apoptosis can come in there to remove those cells, to kill them. And the third example that I have for you here is that during the development of an embryo, organs are actually shaped through essentially through paring away excess cells through apoptosis. So in the example here, we can see that we've got the beginnings of a hand, and we're using apoptosis. You can see that in the areas that are shaded in red to, I guess, pare away all of those excess cells until we end up with a nice functioning hand. So we're getting rid of the excess cells so that we can use that hand when we're born. Now, there are two pathways that apoptosis can take. So the two ways it can happen. Starting off with, we have the intrinsic pathway. And I'd like you to try and link the word intrinsic with the word internal in your mind, okay? So the intrinsic pathway is where it's an internal signal. So this is coming from inside the cell. The cell is saying something's going on. I need to undergo apoptosis. I need to be killed or to die. This is also referred to as the mitochondrial pathway. And the reason for that is that that signal actually comes from the mitochondria of the cells. This happens when a cell is stressed or a cell's infected or it's damaged in some way. That mitochondrial or intrinsic pathway can be activated. And this is also how we remove cells that might be damaged during the cell cycle. The other pathway that apoptosis can take is the extrinsic pathway. So here I would like you to link extrinsic with the word external, please. So the extrinsic pathway is where the signal is coming externally, so it's coming from outside of the cell. And this is also called the death receptor pathway. And this is typically it's activated by the immune system. The immune system might notice a cell not functioning and say, okay, this cell needs to die for whatever reason. Okay, so finally, we'll just look at the mechanism of action for apoptosis. So this is how it actually occurs. So once that intrinsic or extrinsic pathway has been activated, cells receive the signal. It needs to undergo programmed cell death. The first step is that the cell will just start shrinking. Okay, so our cell will get smaller and smaller, and we'll have blebs forming. And you can see here in this picture, we can see some blebs forming. And these are just like protrusions or bulges in the membrane of the cell. And eventually, those blebs will start forming our apoptotic bodies. So this is where the internal contents of the cell, the contents of the cytoplasm, the nucleus, the organelles, they will be contained in these apoptotic bodies, which are like vesicles formed. And these apoptotic bodies will then float around free floating, where they can then be cleaned up by phagocytes. And technically, being cleaned up by phagocytes isn't a part of apoptosis. It's an important part in the process, but that's something that happens whether or not apoptosis is happening. Our phagocytes are like the garbage trucks of the body. They're always sort of moving around, looking for things to clean up. And these apoptotic bodies will be recycled, broken down, and if the body can reuse any of those materials that were in there or molecules, that they will. Okay, so we'll have one more video on apoptosis.